Hey guys, it's Zach back with an ever-increasing massive disaster of packages going in and out of my house behind me, and another review. This time it's the OneOdio Focus A6. It's a Bluetooth ANC headset that touts high-quality audio, a gaming mode, and also very high levels of comfort. It's my first review of a headset and also my first review of a product from this company, so I'm pretty stoked to check it out. So is it possible that this headset is worth you picking up? Let's find out. So here we are continuing our audio trend as of recently, and this is our first over-ear headset we're looking at. Again, the Focus A6 from OneOdio. Touts high-res audio over both wireless and wired, with an LDAC to assist in that way. And then tech spec-wise, claims 75 hours of ANC off sound, 40 hours of ANC on sound, has 40mm drivers, weighs in at 240 grams, and the active noise cancellation is rated to negative 48 decibels. Talk about the unboxing real quick. It was a bit challenging to get the box out of the sleeve here. As I re-demonstrate, there we go. Obviously, I've already unboxed this, so the headphones are right there. We'll show those in a minute. But basically, this cover came over very bare bones setup here. You got the instructions. There was this USB-C to USB-C cable. It functioned well, but although for my setup it was a bit short. So if you're going to use this long term in the wired mode, which I would suggest if you're going to game or anything like that, you might want to look into a longer USB-C cable or potentially just think about your setup and if the length of this cable is okay for you. But here we have it, the headset itself. Pretty stylish looking in my opinion. This is like a cream white construction here. Got the silver on the ear cups with the logo right in the center. Almost all the construction on this headset is plastic. Beside these faceplates here and this thin metal band on top. As far as the onboard controls go, we have a button for the ANC on and off here. This turns the headset itself on and off, and then a volume up and down control along with our USB-C port here. The ear cups on these are plush faux leather. They're very, very comfortable. I have decent sized ears that stick out, and these did not contact my ears at all. I did not have any ear discomfort due to the ear cups, and these are very soft. If your room is very humid or you're in the heat, you will potentially sweat a little bit from these. I had that issue for the first night I used them, but it did not pop up again after that point. The headband here is also very plush, as you can see. Headband fatigue and pain is something that I really struggle with in headphones, and again, after extended use on this, I did not experience any discomfort or pain from the headband. I think the slight tilt here to the headband really helps this headset stay securely on your head while you're wearing it, but there's not a strong clamping force at all. It's sort of perfectly well done for comfort and security there with the headset, so big props to OneOdio in that area. Of course, the band here is adjustable. I do wish the steps were a little bit more defined so you could stop it exactly where you wanted it, but after a bit of tweaking, it wasn't too hard to get it to a comfortable spot for myself. One more feature to note that I've passively shown here is there is a rotation here of the ear cups. There's maybe like a 30-degree outward rotation here, and then just over a 90-degree inward rotation, which makes it super easy to drape these over your neck should someone walk up to you and you want to keep the headset attached to you but not on your head. That is one of my favorite features I've used ever since I had the Astro A40s way back on my Xbox 360, and I really appreciate the inclusion here on the A6. I would say overall the build quality on this is pretty solid. The plastic does feel kind of cheap, so I'm sure if you drop this there could be some damage. And I do detect a little bit of creaking in this area of the headband if you sort of pull this apart, squeeze the ear cups, but nothing that I really noticed while I was using the headset. So overall the build quality is not insane, but I was very satisfied with it in my day-to-day usage of this headset. One more note is that for colorways there is also an almost all black version of this. The only difference being that these faceplates here are also black with a gold outline, and the logo of OneOdio is also gold. Now, as far as the audio performance of this headset, it was overall a positive experience, but it was a mixed bag in some areas. I will say if you have the volume turned up at all on these and there's someone else in the room with you, there is some sound bleed that will come out of the headset. So just something to note that if you use these on a commute, for example, you might not want to crank the volume. Overall, the active noise cancellation performance on these was pretty solid. I tested this with one of those tower fans right in my face, and I could barely hear the sound. It was there, but it was muted to a really strong extent, and I didn't really hear any of the background PC fan noise of my desktop, which is right here next to me. So I was very much satisfied with this. I will say I don't usually use active noise cancellation headsets for too long because the sort of pressure that is built up and created by the ANC does really bother me. That is really just a me thing, and that's sort of how ANC works, but I will say the pressure on this was a little bit lesser than that on the previous headset that I had, which was a nice surprise. As far as the actual audio performance and tuning itself, there are two things that stick out to me on this. A, there's a definite bass boost. It's not like bass head overwhelming on the default tuning, but it's definitely noticeable. Specifically, there was often a persistent sort of rumble in the sub bass range that I would notice on songs that I wouldn't really expect it. And then I would say the tuning on this is also very vocal forward as far as the mids go. The vocals are brought to the forefront. They're very clear, very present, very forward. They don't really compete with the bass. Both have presented very well, but I will say it sort of blocks out the treble and sort of drowns it out and sort of mashes a lot of the sounds together. As I will do, I will reference the cymbals for the end of the song Defying Gravity from the Wicked soundtrack, and they were pretty much almost entirely drowned out by both the bass and the vocals with how loud they are on that point. So it wasn't the best experience I've had listening to that song. However, listening to dubstep tracks from Skrillex was very, very enjoyable on these with the bass boost, which is to be expected. EDM is probably one of the main genres you're targeting with this sort of a tuning. And then I did do some listening to Mumford & Sons' latest album as I'm going to see their concert later this summer, so I want to be up to date on their album and the set list. And basically what listening to their albums told me is that the separation of sound on these is not the absolute greatest. Like I said, with the boosted vocals and bass, a lot of the separation of instruments is lost and sort of melded together. You're not really hearing like those individual strums. I think again this is partially due to the tuning as well as the audio on this is not not like the clearest sound, it's pretty good, and I think the average consumer who's not into audio would have a really good time with this. I think like it's a really strong recommendation for like someone's cousin for a gift, someone who just needs an ANC headset for flights, who wants to just have a nice solid headset to wear around the house, to connect to their phone. Like this performed very well at a base level, but to me, I don't know if I call myself an audiophile. I guess if you reviewed 3 IEMs and you have like 4 headsets and 15 IEMs, you probably are an audiophile. There was a bit of a lackluster performance to me as far as that separation of instruments went. The sound stage to me sounded wide, but that's because I've been listening to exclusively IEMs. It obviously was not as wide as an open back headset like my HD6XX Sennheiser/Drop, but those are open back, so that kind of makes sense. As far as closed back headsets go, this was satisfactory to me. And then the imaging as far as footsteps, I did try to use this for gaming, and there's 2 issues I had with this in gaming. You could give a general direction of where footsteps were coming, but it wasn't overly precise. Like I could tell it was coming from the left or the right, but I couldn't really tell necessarily how far away it was from me to an extent and detailed level that I was looking for. And then again, applied to instruments, running certain tests on like having instruments go left, right, forward, backward, in any combination of those directions. I wasn't able to necessarily precisely pinpoint those in the same way that I would on a very expensive IEM. But again, that's not really what you're going for in this headset, and I wasn't really disappointed at all in the performance there. The other note about audio, and I'll show you this when we get to the app settings. Side note, this headset does have a companion app, and it is one of the absolute strongest points of the headset. By default, on Bluetooth, there's about a half-second delay from what you see on the screen to the sound you're hearing on this. There's a gaming mode that when you flip that on, that reduces to about a 1/10 of a second. To me, in competitive gaming, that's not acceptable, so I wouldn't really suggest these for competitive gaming in wireless mode over Bluetooth. Although for Bluetooth, 1/10 of a second is really not that bad of a delay if you're doing anything else. It did bother me when editing again. I did switch to the wireless version of this with that included USB-C cable, and that dropped the delay dramatically to almost 0. At least it wasn't noticeable to me, and then this became completely usable both in-game, for editing, for anything where you needed real-time sound. There wasn't really any delay in wired mode, which makes sense. So overall, my assessment for gaming is if you're in wired mode, and you're like a casual to average gamer who doesn't want the absolute most precise footsteps, which is a majority of people, I would say, who play games. You're like a casual Fortnite player, you're just playing single-player games, this would be a pretty solid option for you. Assuming you're not playing a game with a lot of like high explosives, because I do think the bass boost on like those explosives would probably drown out footsteps, and potentially louder sounds in general from the mids and the lows might have the same consequences. I will say, after talking about all these features and the tuning of the headset, depending on how handy you are, tuning might not be the most important thing. I do wish this had a better baseline tuning that was a little more neutral, a little more friendly to all people, but then again, maybe majority of people do like a bass boost and I just don't know that. And if you're wondering, I have been trying to outline this part of the lock-on root pad of my headset the entire time, and it's been pretty fun. Anyway, you can EQ this in the app, which is pretty sick. And on that note, let's transition to that app. So here we have the app, and as some of you might know, I use my iPhone as my main camera right now. So here's an iPad to show it off. Anyway, you can toggle ANC on and off here very easily, as well as transparency mode. I did test out this wind noise reduction mode here. It's not perfect, but it does reduce the sort of drag sound on your headphones produced by wind, so I was satisfied with that. There are some different EQs here as well. It defaults to pop, and they also have bass in bass mode, but you can do a custom EQ here and tune the range from 60 to 15,000 hertz as you would like. I've not messed around with this as of yet, but as I continue to use these, I most likely will. Beyond that, we also have a feature to find your headphones. This causes it to make a dull beeping sound to make it easier to find them if you should lose them. I also have dual device connection enabled here, which is awesome. It's connected to both my PC and my phone at the same time and can function through both without any issues. Gaming mode here is what I had toggled on to lower that latency from about a half second to a 1/10 of a second. You can also set a reminder to take it off after a certain amount of time. Limit the max volume to 80 decibels, which is similar to what I do on my iPhone typically at 75 decibels. You can also auto power off, as well as apply a movie sound effect, which I didn't really enjoy when I was doing the audio, but I also did not watch any movies with this headset. I will say overall, this app takes the headset to a new level. Being able to toggle these with a simple touch and having them apply while you're using it on your PC is very nice, as opposed to some kind of complex onboard controls. I think the two other huge wins here are both being able to do your own EQ, as well as toggle on the game mode. I wasn't able to test that very thoroughly, but I would assume that there is a slight decrease in battery life when you have that toggled on. That about sums it up for my thoughts on the OneOdio Focus A6. I did do a little bit of research in the Focus A5, and it seems that they've improved this thing across the board. So overall, good progress here from OneOdio. A few areas of improvement I would look for would be the better default tuning, maybe slightly more premium build construction, and then a lower latency on the default Bluetooth, or lower latency as well on the game mode. But overall, for casual listening and viewing, as well as gaming on the game mode, these are very comfortable, have relatively pleasing bass tuning to a general audience, and for $70 to $80, depending on a sale, I can give these my full recommendation as a solid noise-canceling Bluetooth headset. I am curious to see what the high-end headsets from OneOdio perform like, and I'm hoping to test out some of those in the future. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, please subscribe and leave a like on the video. Follow me on Twitter at DashToDeck. I just finished a giveaway for a mouse there. Join up on my peripheral Discord. We do discuss audio, as well as mice, keyboards, and everything else. Check out the Mousecast podcast, and with that, we'll see you.